Bismillah Rahman Rahim. All right, students, welcome once again to another very interesting podcast interview with a very erudite scholar from the Netherlands, from the University of Amsterdam. And first and foremost, please let me start with apologies for some delay. As you know, we are facing some technical problems throughout the country. And because of that, we face some delay, and we might face some delay, some problems even during the program. But please do stay tuned because you are going to learn a lot today from a from a very scholarly person. I would like to welcome Professor Esther Quedekas, who is from the Netherlands. Welcome, Doctor. How are you?
Uh, Thank you. I'm fine. Think you're
Okay.
frozen. Oh yeah.
Okay, ma'am, first tell us a little bit about yourself. Then we will talk about your university also. But do tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you teach, what you write about, what you've accomplished, and then we can go to the second question after that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you already said my name is Esther Quadakers. I work as a big historian at the University of Amsterdam, and I've been doing that for more than 15 years now. Uh, Working as a big historian at that university means I teach a lot of big history courses, also big history-ish courses, which look at the history of something specific as seen through a big history lens. And that is also what my research is about. So I use a big history perspective, and you'll learn more about what big history is, I think, soon, to study usually buildings, because I was originally trained as an architect a long time ago. You want to know more, or is that enough for now?
Big history. I don't think we can start without the Big Bang. So when you are doing big history, what topics do you cover? Do you cover the Big Bang? Do you cover evolution? I mean, what is big history exactly?
So big history is a form of history that indeed tries to provide integrated overviews of all known history, and that means it starts at the Big Bang, ends today. It generally includes the history of the universe, the history of the Earth, the history of life on Earth, and also large parts of human history, the main processes in human history, so to say.
So when you hear a word like the universe, what is the universe to you? What is our place in the universe to you? Because that is where all inquiry and all knowledge started, when people started asking the question, what is my place in the universe? So what is your definition of the universe, and what is our place in the universe according to your research?
Well, first of all, my research is not about our place in the universe, and I'm also not an astronomer or an astrophysicist. I have a master's degree in the sciences, soon to be a PhD in the humanities. So that is my background, and I can only answer any of your questions from that background. Um, I'll try nevertheless, even though, as I said, not an astronomer, not an astrophysicist. When it comes to what the universe, how I would define the universe, I guess there are two main points that I'd like to make. First of all, first point is that I don't really know, nobody really knows what the universe is, just how we can describe the observable universe, because that is only a very small part of the universe, very likely at least, only the part from which light has had time to reach us in the 13.8 billion year existence of the universe. So when I talk about the universe, from now I will mean the observable universe. And even when it comes to that observable universe, the question how to define that, what that really is, that's really difficult to answer. Um, because if you think about what something is or defining something, you basically talk about what the essential features are, right? And who gets to define what's essential about the universe? So that's a somewhat subjective question. You can name a few features, say its age or the way it's expanding or what it's filled with. Um, but what comes up, that depends on the person who is mentioning these features. So what scientists generally do is they don't define the universe, they don't ask what it is, they just describe the part of it that they can actually see, observe, and measure with their instruments. So that is, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, no, it answers my questions, and I am more interested in your perspective rather than an answer. So whatever your perspective is very welcome with me. All right. Like you said, the universe is expanding. Now, my degree is also in social sciences, but I have an interest in all things that are related to us as human beings. So I wonder if you could just give me your perspective when we are talking about the expanding universe. Obviously, when we were students, we read that the universe is expanding, but later on, the Hubble Space Telescope told us that the universe is actually flying apart. So, if you have read about this, the expansion of the universe, just tell us a little bit about how is the universe expanding? What are the forces in the universe? If you've read anything about that or done any research on that, then we will come to humanities-related questions. We will.
Well, that the universe is expanding, we can actually see that, observe that these days. So you can look at the light. Just a minute. I have to close the door here because it's getting really loud. Just a minute. So live recordings and live episodes while working from home can be complicated. You were asking about so you were asking about the expansion of the universe. Well, we can actually see that it's expanding. For instance, by looking at the light from faraway galaxies. And when you measure that light, you can deduce a few things. You can sort of see, if you have sort of a standard light source, you can sort of see how far away it is. And you can also see how the object that light is coming from, that galaxy, for instance, how that is moving. You can see whether it is moving away from us or towards us. And as it turns out, almost all of the galaxies we see around us are moving away from us. And the further they are away from us, the faster they're moving away from us. And if you think about that, that implies that our universe is expanding. And it has been expanding for 13.8 billion years. So when you roll the clock back, then at 13.8 billion years, you get to a point where the universe was very small, very hot, very dense. And that is what we call the Big Bang. To put it very simply. I think you're frozen again. So technical difficulties. You still there?
Yes, I believe you.
Yes.
I believe you were saying that if we turn the clock backward, then we can actually go back and see that when the universe started, how small it probably was, and then it expanded for 13.5 billion years, and then it became what it was. A lot of people get very uncomfortable when they hear a term like evolution. What is evolution and natural selection? And is there a moral and social aspect to evolution?
Well, I'm not a biologist either. But I guess I can in very simple terms explain what evolution is. So evolution is biological evolution is about the generation of these hereditary variations. And these variations, for instance, these genetic differences, they ensure that organisms have these different characteristics. And organisms with different characteristics, when you put them in a certain environment, these characteristics can be beneficial in the sense that organisms have a better chance at surviving and reproducing, or they can be neutral. It can also be bad for the reproductive and survival chances of an organism. And if you just take that into consideration and add some time to the process, then you'll see that over the course of time, these characteristics, these variations that yield to better chances of survival and reproduction, they will become more prevalent, and that is basically natural selection. If there's a moral dimension to evolution, what do you mean by that? Can you explain that in greater detail?
You're asking about the moral aspect of evolution?
Yes, but what does that mean to you? What do you mean by that?
What I'm saying is, because when you're talking about evolution, do societies and human beings evolve morally as well into better human beings over time, just as species evolve through natural selection into better and more adaptable creatures? Is there a moral aspect, a social aspect to that as well?
So evolving into a species that is more adapted to its environment is not necessarily the same as better, right? What does better mean in that sense? And likewise, you can say, well, a certain kind of morality. So being able to set some rules, I guess, some rules about how to interact with each other in a certain group. Those rules, they can be beneficial in a certain environment, but also not beneficial. So I wouldn't necessarily call them better. They can be, they can have these advantages in a certain setting, but also not. You can, for instance, imagine that if there is some sort of moral behavior, in the sense that certain rules that you set up in your interaction with others that has a genetic basis, then that can be beneficial for surviving also surviving as a group. But it can also be bad for you if, for instance, others in that group take advantage of that. So it depends. There's no, I wouldn't dare to argue that evolution that results in the development of morals all the time in every situation. And I definitely wouldn't dare to argue that that would somehow be good. Because that is a value judgment, basically, whether that's good or not. And that's not what evolution is about.
Excellent to hear your perspective on that, because a lot of evolutionists actually argue that evolution is always for the better. But this is a very good perspective that you've given us. That better again is a very subjective word, and what does better mean may be different for one group, and it may be different for another group.
Yeah.
All right. Let me come to another question, which is related to your research on the Tiananmen Square massacre. Is that what you are writing about?
No, it's not. So I told you I'm an architect by training. I completed a degree in architecture a long time ago, and I've been working in the field of big history ever since. So I've been using this big history perspective to think about buildings. And I at some point I chose to focus on Tiananmen, the building, so the gate of heavenly peace in Beijing, to use as a subject for that, simply because I was really interested in it, because it seemed so different from what I grew up, from the environment I grew up in. And I also figured, okay, these traditional Chinese buildings, there's a really interesting philosophy behind it, in which sort of a balance between humans, but also between humans and their environment, plays an important role. And given the challenges that we face about how we humans interact with our environment, I figured it would be interesting to look into. So I look at the building. I don't look at any protests or other developments, political developments that took place around the building, at least not as my main focus point.
It's so nice to know that you are into architecture, because I have quite a few students who are interested in architecture. So, if a person wants to become an architect, what are the 3 or 4 main qualities that they should try to develop in themselves?
Oh, so I've been working in the field of big history for 15 years. So my knowledge about architectural, let's say, educational programs might be a bit outdated. But you have to, yeah, no. You have to like designing things. You have to be sensitive to how people use a building, use a space. Creativity is important, of course, but also to a certain extent technological know-how. It's a rather interdisciplinary field, so in that sense, it's not too different from big history, which of course is also very interdisciplinary. It's just interdisciplinary in a much more practical here and now type of way.
So
So
yes,
that
of
would also
course.
be an important requirement for architects, being able to work with, not just be curious about, but also work with lots of different people, different fields.
Yes, definitely, and also knowing a little bit of the background in which the buildings have evolved. Again, I'm using the word evolution, but how societies have changed and how those buildings reflect those changes in society. That is also an aspect of a very important aspect of architecture. So the different how does your knowledge of architecture help you in big history? What was the connection? How did you connect the two?
Well, in principle, I don't know. I think that a certain inclination for interdisciplinary thinking and having a background in the sciences, but also in the arts, that helped me while pursuing big history. I think the other way around. I think big history has been more influential in my thinking about architecture, because I've eventually found a way that, at least for me, helps to understand why buildings, particular buildings like Tiananmen, have become the way they are as a result of all of these different astronomical, geological, biological, and cultural processes combined. And that is what that's what I think is a fascinating perspective, that you can take one building and then basically trace how its materials became the way they are, and how animals learned to put these materials together into built structures, and what makes humans the same but also different in that respect, and how all of these things combined, and lots of other things that happened in human culture eventually led people in some parts of the world to build in a certain way, whereas in other parts of the world they do things rather differently. So having that sort of it's not all encompassing. It's a broad view that integrates many different perspectives on that particular building. That helps me understand it in new ways, and also think about the future of building in somewhat new ways. Haven't entirely figured that out yet. That's how you can sort of apply that to the future. But I there are some leads.
I did a course with an online course, and the professor. Maybe you can give a perspective on that as well. The professor was teaching about the consequences of the First World War in Europe, and he said that if you look at the architecture before the First World War, the architecture was very ornate, and after that, in order to reflect the pain or the problems that came with this First World War, the buildings became very um, only related to the purpose that they were serving. The beauty and all that were not the same as they used to be before the First World War, and that then the marketers then converted that into what became known as the purpose-built structures. So yeah, definitely, it's an interesting study. Have you by any chance studied the Taj Mahal?
No, I would have loved to, but I've never found the time to do that. So perhaps in the
Because
future.
the Taj Mahal, of course, is a marvel of architecture of its time, and even today, it's a marvel of architecture.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come to if a student pursues a degree in big history, what kind of careers can he look forward to?
Well, first of all, at the University of Amsterdam, big history is not a field, so there's no bachelor or master's degree that you can get in big history. It's just uh, there are lots of different big history courses that we offer to lots of different students, and at their very different levels. So first year courses, but also third year courses and master projects. Um, what can you do with those? Well, I guess to a certain extent, in a very general way, sit back a bit, zoom out, see the big patterns, but also see all of the connections between all of these different processes. So the astronomical, the geological, the biological, the cultural processes. Because to me, big history is eventually about these connections. And you can do several different things with them. You can use them as a researcher to see what kinds of connections come up that may not have been explored yet, given that in many other areas of university there are these well more confined disciplines. So sometimes questions that fall in between disciplines haven't been picked up yet, even though the cooperation between different fields in universities that is rapidly improving. So there are many more people doing these interdisciplinary things. But still, I think big history can help you find really interesting interdisciplinary research questions. But it could also be very interesting for other fields. So I can imagine that if you take big history while pursuing a teaching degree, it can help you connect to other teachers at your future school and come up with a more integrated curriculum in which students can also see, okay, now I'm in physics learning this, but this is also related to what is going on in biology and what is going on in human history. Um, Likewise, I think the realization that these interconnections are everywhere and also very important, have been very important in shaping our past. It makes you think about their importance for shaping the future as well. So for policymakers, that's also important knowledge to have, I think. And you can probably come up with many more things, but research, teaching, policy making, those would be important fields that could utilize big history, I think.
And I'm happy that you mentioned those connections between people, because if we take different societies and if we study them, then there are always things that are present in one society which are present in some completely unrelated society. For example, if you go to Syria, you find something called shawarma, which they eat, and the same thing you will find in Mexico. They call it taco. It's almost the same thing. So there might be some connection somewhere between these cultures. But when you were studying big history, and what were some interesting questions in your study of big history? Like you said, today students can look at some questions and explore them. So, what were some interesting questions that you found and you explored?
Well, I think the first interesting thing that I found that actually made me pursue big history, and I found many more things after that, but the first was probably coming from an architecture background and starting to look at building from a biological perspective as well. The realization that actually it's not entirely normal for humans to build because there are many animals that don't build stuff because they have better ways to deal with certain problems. And if you then start looking at the animals that do build, particularly build elaborate structures, then it's usually the tiny creatures, the insects, for instance, or birds. It's generally not mammals, and particularly not large mammals. And of course, our primate ancestors built some things, but they remain pretty simple. So why did we start to build such much more elaborate structures. And how did that affect our our own history? I mean, human history without being able to, without the ability to build cities would have been something very different. So how does that work exactly? And that was something of yeah, I had never realized that before, that you could ask questions like that, because when I studied architecture, it was just a given that humans build, and it was, yeah, of course, because we are so smart, we do that, because we can, we do that. But you start to question all of these things that we take for granted when you change perspectives, when you change your perspective on things. And I think you can do that with building, but also with many, many other topics.
Yes, absolutely. And even when we talk about reptiles, reptiles also don't build uh, don't build homes, but snakes don't build homes, for example. But of course, there's one snake in India, the king cobra, the female king cobra. She does build a nest. So the only snake ever known to build a nest. So of course that. Let's come to farms. You mentioned cities, but how
Yeah.
would human history have been different had there been no farms? Where did people learn to make farms and just stop picking things from the jungle?
Oh, well, without without sedentary communities and farms, I think you would not have had a surplus. And without a surplus, you would not have had specialization, at least not to the extent that we see around us today. If you think about animals that have a certain specialization, think about eusocial animals that have specialized reproductives and non-reproductives colony members. They also generally stay in one place, also have a sedentary lifestyle, and some even manage to invent farming. So that specialization, that is tied in some ways to being sedentary, staying in one place, and cultivating your own foods there. Um, and well, that specialization in turn, that is so important for the complexity in human societies that we see all around us, because it is that, strangely enough, that the division in things that people do that allow people to become so good at certain things, and therefore to well, yeah, to create civilization as we know it, basically. So coming from an interdisciplinarian, that's also a plea in a certain sense for specialization. It's really important, but you also need to keep an eye to remain sensitive about the connections between everything.
Uh, and now let's say we have made farms
Yeah.
and we have made buildings and we have made cities and we've become a more complex society. In this complex society, how important, again, this is a question not related to architecture, but then maybe you can give your perspective on this. How important is a social contract, and how important are the responsibilities of us as citizens? What are citizens supposed to do, good citizens?
Ooh, I find that really hard to answer. Um, so I guess it's in the interest of almost all humans that the group that they are part of, that stays functional. But you can function in many different ways. So is there a best way? I don't know. Um, so again, so hard to answer this question. Sorry.
So the reason I ask this question is because I believe that this is also a question that can be explored in big history, because in Europe, people take good citizenship as a given.
Yeah.
You are a citizen, you do certain things, you fulfill certain responsibilities, and you. But that may not be the case in all societies. That may not be the
Hmm.
case in those states which are considered to be failing states or failing societies.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, maybe this is a question that can be explored further. So tell us something about the University of Amsterdam.
Well, I don't have all of the numbers ready, but it's a big university, the largest in the Netherlands, or almost the largest in the Netherlands, as far as I'm aware, with a very strong research profile. So there are these top research institutes in all kinds of fields. It's also, and that is important for me, is a university that is emphasizing interdisciplinarity more and more. So that's very nice. That also means that there are lots of opportunities to pursue, for instance, a combined major minor in very different fields. Mm, yeah, and it's a nice place. It's a nice place to study.
And of course, when I was in grade two, I was taught about, we had geography books, no internet at the time, no nothing. We
Yeah.
had those black and white geography books, and in that book there was a chapter on a country which was below sea level,
Yes.
and that is why it was called Netherlands, because it was below the sea level, and we were actually taught how the dikes were built and how the country is. So how is Netherlands as a country for a student? If a student is going to the Netherlands, what can he expect? What is the country like? Now, of course, you can answer that question very well, because I think you've studied in Netherlands throughout.
True, but what I'm lacking here is a perspective, so a foreign perspective on studying in the Netherlands, right? But I think that generally speaking,
We are interested in your perspective. Forget about the foreign, just
okay,
your perspective.
it's a I think it's a place where many people, all people speak English, so that is convenient for people moving to the Netherlands from other countries. Um, that actually makes it difficult to learn Dutch because everybody will speak English to you, regardless whether or not you try to speak Dutch. It's also a place that is where at least educational institutions are not very hierarchical. So there are no big barriers in approaching a lecturer or um, somebody else, another expert you want to talk to. Um, it has a relatively open culture, so people, well, normally, hopefully, are accepted for who they are, regardless of what they are. Um, yeah, and it's an institution that has it's not it has a certain now I'm looking for the words. So it has a rigorous research culture, um, but there's also a lot of room for just engaging, relaxing, inspirational activities. So I think that those things will make it a nice place to study. And well,
Obviously, and it goes, goes yeah, please go ahead.
and it has a number of top rated programs. So that could also be important.
Yes, of course, that's very important for students, that it has a very high educational standard, and it's a very open society, and it's a very beautiful country. Uh, one last question before we finish. You studied architecture, and why did you choose to go into teaching rather than another profession? And what would you advise those people who want to become teachers in the future?
I did not choose to go into teaching. I ended up mostly in teaching, but in a very specific type of teaching, teaching big history. So when I studied architecture, I at a certain point just wanted to know, okay, so how do buildings fit into this bigger picture? Why are buildings different from place to place, from time to time? What factors, sociological, but also other factors, can explain that? And that is what led me to the field of big history. And I just thought that it was such an exciting field, given the opportunity that I just talked about, given the opportunity that it offers um, to find all of these new interdisciplinary research questions that you can do so much with, that are so exciting, to explore. That's on live television. Sorry. So that is why I just never left, and eventually that led to all kinds of opportunities for big history research and teaching. Mostly teaching, but that also has to do with the structure, with the infrastructure, better to say, for interdisciplinary research. That, at least when I started my Tiananmen project, was not that well developed yet. So it was really hard. It still is somewhat hard to get funding for interdisciplinary research projects. Interdisciplinary teaching, on the other hand, had a bit of a head start. So it seemed easier. It has been easier to develop interdisciplinary teaching programs than interdisciplinary research programs, although the latter types of activities, they are catching up quickly now, fortunately. So my answer to that, what I would encourage students, or what I think that students could get out of that would be very similar to what I just talked about when I talked about the advantages or the opportunities that come with studying big history.
One final perspective I need from you, in a world which is very technology centric and AI based and stuff like that,
Mhm.
what is the importance of studying humanities? And I was taught that the world will become a better place if people have more understanding of each other's cultures.
Yeah.
We simply try to understand each other, and understanding means looking at reality from the other person's perspective. um, Unfortunately, I find, maybe your reading is different, but I find that that is not the case with the way people are thinking these days. A lot of people are not very good at looking at reality from other people's perspectives. A person will always say, "I'm not a bigot. I don't discriminate against other people, but yes, I don't like to be around people who don't think like me. If someone is different, I don't want to be." So, is education achieving its purpose, and what is the significance of studying humanities in today's world? Final question.
Well, I think that unfortunately the reality is that many educational institutions are still, I mean, they don't, they're not a representation of the population of, well, not the world, and definitely not an entire, and even not in a specific country like the Netherlands. So there is already a selection for a certain kind of people, I guess, who get to answer, who get the opportunity for instance, participate in university education. And there are, of course, attempts to change that, but it's hard, it's difficult. So in that sense, I don't think education is contributing as much as it could, at least institution wise. Um, but that means there are opportunities for improvement and change, right? Yeah, when it comes to just using big history education as a basis for answering your question, um, the one ideal behind big history education is that it offers a shared story that people from all over the world can identify with. So it's not a history of a particular country. It's not a history of a specific continent even. It's a history of the entire planet and all of the people on it and all of the other life forms on it as well, and placed in an even broader perspective. Um, so I guess I hope that could help people to form a somewhat more common identity. I don't know if it helps people to relate to each other, but it could be one thing that binds them. Um, so perhaps that can also be a contribution of big history. But of course, well, time has to tell if that will have any effect.
it's actually very unfortunate that people usually come together on the basis of a shared identity rather than shared responsibility and shared humanity. And when we talk about, you absolutely hit the nail on the head when you said that if you could give people a common narrative, if a people have a common narrative, like if there's a narrative of the Exodus, then all the people who went through the Exodus or have that same narrative, they will come together. Likewise, if we have a narrative based on the Big Bang, or some narrative that we developed together as human beings into what we are today, then maybe at least we can develop some kind of similar identity, if not a shared humanity. Well, thank
Yes.
you very much indeed, Dr. Quedekas. It was a real honor and a real privilege, and may God bless you.
Yeah.
Uh, and thank you very much indeed.
It was so nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.